is by Alessandra Calanchi. She is Associate Professor at University of Urbino, and she teaches Anglo-American literature and culture. Has different projects with students on the literature, soundscapes, and she also is a co-editor of several journals, for example, listening to British and American languages and cultures. The second talk is by Chris Wright. She works with cross-cultural sound studies, and her projects are on sound as a cross-border agency. You know, we have 20 minutes for the talks and then 10 minutes for questions. You are welcome.
Thank you. Thank you so much. Thank you, everybody. I have some slides in both English and Italian, so I hope everybody can understand. I will speak about how a literary text can be a sustainable form of resistance to gender violence. The importance of sounds and noises as embedded in culture and testified in literature has already been asserted by many scholars who, however, do not often delve into domesticity, which is the field of my present investigation. A Whisper in the Dark is a short novel by American writer Louisa May Alcott, the author of Little Women, as you can see. In the middle there is the first edition, and on the right side the Italian edition, which I edited and translated. This novel is focused on an issue that is unfortunately still highly topical, that is physical and psychological violence against women. Even though the term femicide did not exist yet at the time, it is exactly what the story is about. A young woman is deceived, threatened, drugged, and finally accused of insanity and imprisoned, according to the common thought by which any smallest deviance from normality was seen as a symptom of mental instability. The tale was published anonymously in July 1863 and republished in a volume entitled A Modern Mephistopheles and A Whisper in the Dark in 1869. The story tells of an uncle who, after trying to make his niece marry his son and then himself, locks her up in a small madhouse in order to lay hands on her money. In his deed, he is helped by an unscrupulous doctor. Cases like this were frequent in the 19th century to the extent that it has been called the Age of the Asylum. In the period when facts take place, women were continual victims of social and economic discrimination. Women were forced, for a variety of reasons, to be dependent upon their husbands for financial support. That is the condition from which our story originates. We'll see two houses. One is the manor house that the girl is going to inherit, and the other is the madhouse. Houses are made of walls, doors, windows, and stairs. All of these spaces represent boundaries which can or cannot be crossed. Doors which can be locked or open, windows which can be ajar, and thresholds which can be crossed. All of them, together with the rooms and corridors, mark a permanence which can be pleasant or dreadful, and obviously different soundscapes. In the story, the protagonist travels first to her own home, which she is about to inherit, and then to the madhouse. At first, her entry into the wealthy mansion is a joyful act. But later, each time a door opens or closes, marks a step in the downward path that leads to an abyss of violence and deprivation. The maiden is condemned to the loss of her personal possessions, her private space, her light, her freedom, her identity. It is only through listening that she will be able to overthrow her situation. Through a half-closed door, Sybil learns of her uncle's plots, and then it is through a closed door that she receives her mother's dramatic message, the whisper in the dark of the title. Relying on some studies, we shall divide the story into 3 sonic settings: the carriage, the manor house, and the madhouse. The story opens in a carriage, where the uncle is driving his niece, Sybil, home. She scans the face of his uncle to read the information she needs in order to understand what her future will be. Later on, she talks about a long scrutiny and a steady stare. Meanwhile, she remembers reading a letter that she should not have read and stole a peep, rubò uno sguardo. So, scan è il verbo che significa scansionare, scannerizzare, viene usato per guardare la faccia dello zio, fa un lungo scrutiny, poi c'è uno sguardo fisso, steady stare, c'è la lettura e poi c'è rubare un'occhiata. Quindi siamo ancora nel campo della vista. A questo punto, this point, it changes because we have an important turning point from sight, all of these verbs are sight verb, to hearing. The uncle accuses her, you turned eavesdropper early. Hai fatto presto a trasformarti in una spiona. Spiona però non è la spiona della vista. It is not spying. It is eavesdropping, which means ascoltare di nascosto. Secretly listening to a conversation. Indeed, in the manor house, we find much more listening, precisely eavesdropping, as I said, and overhearing, another verb, which means hear without intention. The young girl, in fact, soon becomes aware of her situation through listening to a conversation between her uncle and her cousin. The theme of eavesdropping is very interesting because it introduces a new element into the narrative in an era when new devices that could enable oral communication were being devised. The dictaphone was invented only in 1907. So eavesdropping was one of the verbs we find more often because at the time everybody spoke about having the possibility to hear somebody who was not in the same room. So when the uncle realizes that Sybil won't change her mind, he looks for the complicity of a doctor and locks her up in a madhouse in the countryside. Here, Sybil loses her freedom. She cannot move around. Her long hair is being cut, and she is really going crazy. All that she can do is listening. Soon she starts hearing a constant, irritating noise, the sound of steps in the room above hers. As it turns out, this sound, together with the whisper of the title, is the very element that will allow her to escape. Here you have it in English and Italian. Mi resi progressivamente conto che la camera sopra la mia era occupata da una paziente che non avevo mai visto. I have never saw. Da questo momento in poi tutto si sposta sull'udito. Lei non l'aveva vista, però tutto quello che ascolta è I heard a harsh sound, I listened to, my ears, I heard, murmur, singing, lullaby, tapping, cries. All is sound. One night she finally succeeds in going upstairs, where she hears the whisper of the title. A cloud swept over the moon, and when it passed, the hand was gone. But shrill through the keyhole came a whisper that chilled me to the marrow of my bones. Giunse uno stridulo sussurro, shrill, acuto, through the keyhole, quindi il buco della serratura di solito è usato per vedere, per spiare, qui invece è legato all'udito, came a whisper. Find it, for God's sake, find it before it is too late. Taking these clues and putting them together, the young woman caught in the act by the maid first pretends to be sleepwalking and then begins to ask herself a series of questions. What was I to find? Where was I to look? Again, she doesn't understand that the answer is in hearing, not in seeing. She doesn't know where to look, non sa dove guardare, non sa come risolvere il problema. Che cos'è che dovevo trovare? Non riuscivo a trovare risposte, non riuscivo a capire quale corso prendere. E in inglese to see means understand, ma see vuol dire vedere, ok? Non vuol dire capire. Dove dovevo guardare. So the problem is that she doesn't have to look, she has to listen. Of course, literary critics have ignored sound studies for a long time, and the time has come to free readers from the supremacy of sight. Any reader can realize the importance of sounds in this story, and that is the same in many, many other stories, of course. So I think that attention can and must be given to other literary works which have never been read in this way. A point often addressed by critics is the question of motherhood. The person who is in the room above is her mother, who was locked her 17 years before. Okay, so all critics speak of motherhood. In fact, her mother is the occupant of the same house. But the true epiphany of the tale is oral, not visual, and concerning precisely the communication between the two. The two never see one the other. They just listen to the different voices. And the whisper of the tale acquires meaning only toward the end of the story. What was there before? Before that, there was silence. In this madhouse, silence, the silence that precedes the whisper is precisely the silence to which women have long been forced. So the metaphor for sound is a collective metaphor. It means that women have not been be able to speak and were not listened to. So that is the point of force of this novel. In my opinion, the monstrosity of the violence to which Sibyl's mother has been subjected for 17 years has not been emphasized enough by critics. At a time, ve lo leggo in italiano, in un'epoca in cui immagini e poesie facevano a gara per creare un'immagine robusta e coerente della madre affettuosa e devota, un'immagine che proponeva una visione particolare del corpo materno. Questo è l'unico critico che si occupa di questo racconto in modo moderno, ma dice per 3 volte la parola image, image, image and vision. Non c'è nessun riferimento al sonoro, questo Doyle, nel 2018. E di nuovo portrait, il ritratto di questa donna che canta. La cosa importante è che lei canta la ninna nanna. La madre canta la ninna nanna e la figlia ascolta dal piano di sotto. Quindi la cosa importante è questo l'ho scritto io e non Doyle, di certo un'impressione più sonora che visiva. Noi non la vediamo mai la mamma, non sappiamo nemmeno come sia il suo volto. We just listen to the lullaby. On a Foucauldian path, we find Birgit Spengler's analysis. She in part picks up the discourse by concentrating on the dynamics by which representations of official medicine reflect power and gender structures. So the other question, the other topic is medicine. So we have motherhood and medicine. I'm going to conclude. Le rappresentazioni della medicina ufficiale riflettono le strutture di potere e di genere, le narrazioni di tutto il XIX secolo. Rivestono le donne, assegna alle donne questo ruolo di oggetto di sorveglianza da parte dello sguardo maschile. A questo sguardo poniamo l'ascolto. Non c'è qui con noi Roberto Barbanti purtroppo, ma seguendo il suo invito a decolonizzare l'immaginario, propongo Sibyl come anticipatrice dell'acustinario. L'immaginario se ne va, sparisce, e abbiamo invece proprio questo acustinary a cui ci invita Barbanti. Pertanto invito insegnanti, professori, studenti e lettori ad applicare il più possibile gli studi sul suono ai testi letterari, per farli rivivere, per proteggere le memorie dei tempi andati e per sottrarli alla pericolosa e raramente innocente egemonia della vista. Ultima cosa che voglio dirvi, last but not least, her name, Sibyl, is something that reminds us of sound. You know that Sibyls were sort of prophetesses, profete, that in some traditions did not have a body. They were just made of voice. So I think that Louisa May Alcott was aware of what I say. I don't think it is a forced interpretation. I think that she was well aware of the importance of listening for women. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Alessandra Calanchi, for your talk. Now it's time for questions. Any questions? I think in Italian or English is both.
Never mind.
Ok.
Di Alcott o di altre?
No, nel senso dove
Sì.
c'è questo interesse verso il suono da parte dello scrittore.
Allora, sta a noi trovarli. Allora, mi è stato chiesto se ci sono altri racconti come questo. Secondo me ce ne sono tanti. Adesso io con un mio ex studente stiamo facendo un'antologia proprio che uscirà l'anno prossimo, nel 24, di racconti principalmente dell'Ottocento, perché sono fuori i diritti, in cui il suono ha una rilevanza importante. Sicuramente in questo periodo, cioè la fine dell'Ottocento, c'è molto interesse in campo scientifico anche per il suono. Appunto stiamo passando dall'epoca del telegrafo a quella anche del telefono, quindi c'è questo interesse. E la cosa interessante è che io ho trovato, a parte Edgar Allan Poe, che è pieno di suoni e quindi va recuperato anche da questo punto di vista. Io so che molti insegnanti usano il gatto nero a scuola perché è molto divertente, anche carino, anche se un po' truce. Per esempio nel The Black Cat abbiamo il protagonista che alla fine si auto praticamente denuncia facendo vedere ai poliziotti che bel muro solido ha la sua casa, dentro c'è il gatto che miagolando fa scoprire che la moglie è murata dentro questo. Però anche lì la cosa importante è proprio il miagolio del gatto, cioè con la vista non arriveresti da nessuna parte, quindi già prima che nascesse il genere giallo Poe ha già messo avanti che come si chiamano le tracce non possono essere solo visive ma anche sonore. Un'altra autrice che usa tantissimo il suono è la Catherine Green, di cui ho tradotto molte cose. Ma se vuoi scrivermi alessandra.calanchi@uniurb.it, se no dopo te lo do, perché lei ha scritto tantissimi racconti proprio sull'indagine poliziesca fatta attraverso il suono, ma anche non solo questo, e comunque sempre legato agli studi di genere, quindi c'è molto da lavorare su questo.
Thank you.
Se posso, se vai sul sito www.rsi.ch/radiodrammi, abbiamo Patricia Highsmith con diversi racconti. Vado a recuperare questi di Edgar Allan Poe perché
Certo.
negli anni 80 li abbiamo quasi fatti tutti.
Certo.
Qui magari li rimetto in onda.
Sì, non ho pensato a Highsmith perché io soprattutto mi concentro sulla fine dell'Ottocento, però le donne in generale hanno molta più consuetudine con l'ambito sonoro.
C'è anche un bel Emma, proprio abbiamo ripreso.
Ma è bellissimo, certo.
Andate a ripescarli e potete fare. E questo qua vado a vedere come sono messi i diritti perché ci è venuta voglia di adattare.
Questo è fuori diritto. Noi l'abbiamo pubblicato in italiano.
Però essendoci la traduzione, se usiamo quella, allora devo comunque. Hai detto che è stata tradotta?
Allora, io l'ho tradotto io. Prima è stato tradotto in un'antologia per le lettere di Firenze. Poi me l'hanno chiesto Galad, dove abbiamo anche gli atti dei convegni, e le lettere ha dato il permesso, cioè in realtà io è tutto fatto sopra la mia testa perché io ho ceduto i diritti all'editore, quindi comunque lì a Galad, che è quello che fa i nostri convegni, quindi sarà solo contento di darvi questo diritto, perché il racconto è uscito alla fine dell'Ottocento e noi ci siamo basati sull'originale, non sulle traduzioni, non sulle edizioni americane più recenti, quindi si può fare. E sarebbe molto bello appunto farlo per radio, un audible, perché è talmente sonoro che è pazzesco. Sì, magari ci teniamo in contatto perché sarebbe molto bello che questi racconti, sì, dovremmo fare dei pezzettini corti, non dei racconti interi, però sarebbe molto bello farlo in collaborazione. Bene, grazie.
Thank you. Sorry, there was first another question.
It's not really a question. I teach French at the University of Lausanne for foreigners, so I just teach language, but I'm very happy to hear about your research. And if I understood correctly, you will publish an anthology next year with other texts, and that's great because I'm looking for maybe a future.
Great. And it will be on for Kindle edition, not only paper. So it is obviously more useful for people in other countries. So
that's great. I'm very happy to hear about that.
Keep
and I think you
keep
have
in
shown
touch.
Also, and you have also shown why it's important to also change the focus, because it's not only because we like something to hear something, but also because it makes sense to the analysis of the literary text and also of the social context.
And
so,
students are so happy because they understand different things.
Yeah, definitely.
Thank you.
Thanks.
Thank you.
Io volevo ringraziare Alessandra perché è preziosissimo questo lavoro che anche abbiamo provato a fare nella scuola secondaria di primo grado, proprio nel imparare a leggere insieme. Poi la letteratura però femminile forse ci sviluppa ancora più spazi e sensibilità proprio a trovare ciò che è sonoro da un testo e produrre piccoli podcast, per cui questo è un buon aggancio, cioè registrare poi una volta evidenziate le parti, le parole sonore che diventano a loro volta voce
Sì.
da registrare, quindi ti ringrazio perché c'è un collegamento tra la scuola fino all'università, ecco, mi sento
Sì, ma secondo me infatti si potrebbe fare proprio fin dalla scuola primaria un lavoro su questo, che sarebbe molto interessante, sia anche, cioè, se lo fai in inglese, cioè, chi insegna lingue si studia sulla lingua, chi fa italiano si studia anche lì sulla lingua, ma tutti questi verbi, come prima per esempio c'è stata questa cosa bellissima che quando Agostino ha parlato di for see o for hear, cioè io per esempio quella non ci avevo mai pensato, che non esiste il for hearing, esiste il for seeing, così come per esempio il clairvoyant, non c'è il intendant. Bisogna proprio lavorare sulla lingua perché ci mancano delle parole a volte per esprimere queste cose. Non portiamo via altro tempo a Chris.
Thank you, Alessandra Calanchi. And now we can move on with the next talk. Chris Wright, I said it before, she works with sound as a cross-border agency. Chris speaks in English, but she translated, no, that's totally fine. She let DeepL or Google Translate, DeepL, translating her talk in Italian, in French, and as I have twice in Italian and twice in French.
Yes, the German one was taken, sorry.
Okay. Thank you. Are you ready, Chris?
I need to plug
Yeah.
my PowerPoint. Can I just unplug? Can I just unplug?
Yes, I guess. Yeah, but it's not this.
Oh, no. Oh, wait, this.
No, it's this. Do you have an... Okay, this should be this, yes, for the Mac.
Please. What?
Do you have audio examples?
No.
No, okay. No, audio. It's fine.
Is it there? Can you see?
Yes, so welcome, Chris Wright. Please to begin.
Primo, grazie mille per avermi invitati di nuovo qui. I have not got sound on my PowerPoint because I'm hoping we make the sound ourselves. So, yeah, so if you would like to sing and be loud, what we're going to say will just be on screen, and it is in English because I am using this sort of English as the basis. So, my thoughts are that the sound of the future is the sound of people exercising their right to a different future. So, do you want me to do something? No. No, I'll do. So, people exercising their right to a different future rather than the one dictated to by those in power. It is the mass of people without power, with unheard voices, joining their voices together in a clamour to be heard. It is the sound of change. Cass R. Sunstein writes, speakers require listeners. It is the sound of the crowd. Its size, its ability to amplify and define its goals in the act of asserting humanity's right to achieve them, which makes a difference between the possible and the illusory, writes Matt Clements in 2016. So what distinguishes a crowd of people from simply a crowd to a crowd of protesters is intention. The intention to come together with the view of making themselves heard meaningfully, to be heard and to be listened to. So what I'm thinking about, the sustainability of sound is not just the environment, but also politics, people, sociology, and it sort of encompasses everything. So in 5th century Athens, Ellen Woods writes, citizens in modern democracy have been converted from actors to electors, so creating a space for opposition, dissent, discontent, and conflict. So the importance of democracy is paramount for an equal society and is still being fought over. I have been doing a work on wars where I have been creating a patchwork quilt with the countries of colours of each country where wars are being fought at the moment. Last September there were 23 countries. I now note this morning there are 33, and now I have to make a bigger quilt, and it is such a sad moment, and it is about democracy. So but in this paper there are lots of chants which we have been chanting, sort of mostly the Western world. So I'm going to shout, and if you would like to shout along, you're very welcome. So, show us what democracy looks like. This is what democracy looks like. 1, we are the people. 2, a little bit louder. 3, we want justice for all people. In the United Kingdom and elsewhere, Clement identifies that the losing of common land where the poor could graze their animals was a major factor in creating an impetus for change. This loss was caused by the theft of common lands by more powerful and wealthy landowners and meant that people were no longer tied to one place, thus creating a more mobile population. As Rosa Luxemburg noted, those who do not move do not notice their chains. This change of way of life was a cause of major discontent, especially as it often meant finding an alternative means of living in industrial cities. Poor working conditions was and still is a major cause of protest in the form of strikes in the workplace. In 19th century Italy, Mondine workers protested about their conditions, immortalised in the song Bella Ciao. This has been reused and reworded throughout the world as a protest song, including in Iran as a demonstration against hijab wearing and as Do It Now as an environmental protest. Here we have original versions and the version used between 1943 and 1945 by anti-fascists. If you would you like to sing?
Yeah.
Huh?
Rising now?
Yeah.
Stand up? No?
Yeah. Oh, sing. Sing. No. Let's stand. Let us do it properly.
Dai, in piedi, più bello.
Una mattina sono alzata, oh bella ciao, bella ciao, bella ciao, ciao, ciao. La mattina appena alzata, in risaia mi tocca andare. Una mattina mi sono svegliato, oh bella ciao, bella ciao, bella ciao, ciao, ciao. Una mattina mi sono svegliato e ho trovato l'invasor.
That was fantastic. Thank you. So we have two cores of the initial ideas of protest. One, the lack of democracy, the changing from actors to electors, and the movement of people throughout the countries caused by wealthy landowners stealing. I think there's no other word for it, stealing land, stealing common land. So these workplace protests often escalated into larger and longer protests, such as the miners' strikes in the UK in 1984. This particular strike, with its constant and noisy protests, carried on for nearly a year and caused great hardship. Now, in the UK, legislation has created workplace strikes that have to be voted on, with a particular percentage of workers agreeing before they can take place. In northern Italy, the wildcat strikes at Gatto Selvaggio were of the moment a sudden downing of tools. These gestures of disapproval signified a striving for change, a group of people with a common aim. They created empowerment and a common feeling of shared values and space. The implications of economic, environmental and societal aspects of the agency of dissent, especially noisy vocal dissent, impacts on all strata of society. So creating short and snappy slogans to chant means that they are accessible to all, easy to remember, often rhyming and endlessly recreated for different causes. Some are long-lasting, such as this chant about Prime Minister Margaret Thatcher, which has outlived her lifespan by many years. This is a favourite one of mine. Maggie, 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 out, out, out. Thatcher, Thatcher, school milk snatcher. And when people talk about Maggie Thatcher now, Margaret Thatcher, they still remember these rhymes, and it is 30 years. It's been quite fascinating, really, how that particular one has caught on. So currently, the environment takes centre stage with quick-fire slogans, such as, no more coal, no more oil, keep your carbon in the soil. And there were call and response chants, which encourage large masses of people to respond in an easy way. What do we want? Climate justice. When do we want it? Now. 1, 2, 3, 4. Climate change is at our door. 5, 6, 7, 8. How much longer will we wait? So they are very simple, very quick, but they are endlessly adapted to whichever cause somebody wants to say. So the very act of protest summons authoritarian silencing, thus rejecting not only the protesters' right to dissent, but also their voices. In the late 1990s, I witnessed a pepper workers' strike in Cochin in India. Hundreds of workers, all sat in white, sat immobile and, crucially, silent in a public square. The effect was really powerful, it was really potent, and because they were not causing any harm, they were not disrupting traffic, they were not disturbing anybody, the police were actually ineffective. They could just stand and watch. Occupy, Arab Spring, Zizek writes that 2011 was the year of dreaming dangerously, of the revival of radical emancipatory politics all around the world. He writes, what is to be done in the aftermath of Occupy Wall Street movement, when the protests that began far away in the Middle East, Greece, Spain, the UK, reached the centre and are now being reforced and rolling out around the world? Extinction Rebellion, Yellow Vests, Black Lives Matter. No longer are the mass of people who are currently without power willing to accept the authority of those in power, especially with an attendant abuse of that power. As the chant goes, no justice, no peace. Protests are always about power relationships. And Castells writes, I start from the premise that power relationships are constitutive of society because those who have the power construct the institutions of society according to their values and interest. Power is exercised by means of a coercion, the monopoly of violence, legitimate or not, by the control of the state and or by the construction of meanings in people's mind, through mechanisms of symbolic manipulation. This actually sort of really resonates with Alessandra's and her talking about Whisper in the Dark. There's so many things, it was written about, what year was that book written?
1860.
Yeah. I mean, nothing really has changed. It's just, she was very prescient. And I will reread her as a political writer. However, it is not always prudent to protest. As Sunstein writes, in many parts of the world, non-conformity is death. It is reasonable to conform. As we know, there are many places where justice is no longer a sensible reason to protest, however valid. To stand up for your rights against the prevailing authority is seen as an act of nonconformity. The sound of protest nowadays is amplified through the use of social media and snatched phone footage. It spread quickly throughout the world and all strata of society. It is unhindered, unfettered and viral. Knowledge originally was spread by word of mouth, meaning organised demonstrations were confined to small areas, whereas now the voices of the unheard and the alienated can now move much more swiftly into the future through social media. Castells again. Digital networks of horizontal communication are the fastest and most autonomous, interactive, reprogrammable and self-expanding means of communication in history. This creates a non-hierarchical and mass participatory method of dissemination. And I think this is particularly important and why I have this idea that what will actually happen in the future is that the people with the unheard voices will, maybe how many 100 years, becomes the people with voices heard. That is my hope. So original methods of disseminating displeasure and disagreement were often through song, as seen in Bella Ciao. Jazz associated with civil rights movements, which itself arises from protest songs of Black American blues, but has become disassociated from its original intentions. Dina Weinstein. Protest songs aren't heard as protest songs. The lyrics of folk songs right up to the present day frequently reflect working class discontent. For example, Woody Allen's This Land Is Your Land, written in the 1940s, comments on land ownership being removed from the people, akin to the removal of common land remarked on earlier. Are you ready to sing? Do you know this one? This land is your land, this land is my land, from California to New York Island, from Redwood Forest to Gulf Stream waters, this land was made for you and me. I have forgotten how dry this room is. Clement writes, considering the relationship between music and politics, Pinheiro Blanca argues that music is a reflection of a particular society at any given time, as music becomes a vehicle for the transmission of ideas that are socially, politically relevant and meaningful at specific moments. She continues, the extent to which the composition and performance of protest songs can really make a difference in the struggle against the political and economic systems remains doubtful. It was said, perhaps by Arlo Guthrie, that you don't accomplish very much singing protest songs to people who agree with you. Everybody just has a good time thinking they're right. So the suggestion that the sound of protest is the sound of future is to ask whether sound is an effective means of achieving its aim, such as social, political or environmental justice. From small localised demonstrations against particular grievances to mass uprisings that encompass a large part of the nation, the voice is the potent instrument that carries the intention in the age of the internet and mobile phone. The sound of these large and small protests are spread horizontally and without hierarchy. This also accounts for the widening of knowledge, with injustices being revealed and spread throughout the world. And it is this disclosing that may be the form of future dissent as opposed to the physical demonstration. However, these platforms are routinely shut down by dictators, making them unreliable. Perhaps the form that the sound of the future depends on is as yet unknown technological platforms. Clement suggests that the sound of the crowd is the sound of democracy. Lack of an equal and universal freedom and justice for all, combined with the impact of environmental disaster, is the basis for nearly all protest. I personally can see no prospect of this occurring soon. Therefore, I argue that the sound of the future is the continued sound of protest. These are my references. Thank you.
Thank you, Chris Wright, for this inspiring presentation. Questions to Chris?
I found that really, it was very exciting actually to have that opportunity of joining voices with people, and I didn't know the song. But it was lovely. It was so, and as you say, so easy to pick up that I felt that I was part of it very quickly. So I thought that was a very powerful demonstration.
I hope we're all part of it.
Yes, yes, yes. But it was just that it was new to me, and I suddenly felt embraced by it. So that was wonderful. In your lecturing, is this something that you do, that you get people chanting, and have you created chants of your own?
No, my artwork tends to have a political bias.
Yeah.
And when I got the theme of sound as a sustainable future, I realised that, yes, the environment is actually a big part of it. But for me, I was thinking that it is actually the sound of the people which has to be taken forward. And I actually really do mean that it has to be, because there's just too many injustices in the world. And so I just really wanted to maybe put my own viewpoint forward and just make a suggestion that sustainability is not just environment, but it is political, societal. Thank you.
Yeah, thank you.
Further questions or comments? No, then thank
you very
you,
much.
Chris,
Thank
Wright,
you.
very much.
Thank you.
Now it's time for breath.